How's it going? I'm Adam, and I'm reading for the part of co-host on this podcast. I have a variety of voices and accents that are constantly changing whether or not I want them to.
Uh, oh, you're early.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you got the part. So,
Best audition I've ever had.
So, welcome to episode 5. I think this is episode 5. It's a running joke to me now because every time I say the number of the episode, it's wrong. So, we're going to say 5.
Let's go with 5. 5 sounds like a lucky number, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, how many, so you do auditions for stuff? How often do you do auditions?
Auditions are maybe like once a week. It always depends. Sometimes it's one every day, sometimes it's one every week. And you get pilot season, it gets busy. You get episodic season, it gets busy. Summer, it gets quiet. Winter, holidays, it gets a little quiet, but it's always changing. And with streaming and stuff like that, shows are constantly on a new flexible schedule. And especially after COVID, everything is just a little bit like everything is still figuring out the new normal.
Yeah, like with Stranger Things, how part 2 came out, and I think the first day it came out, I went on Facebook like an idiot, and someone already saw the whole thing.
Yeah,
I'm just like, well, I'm still gonna watch it, but
I will say that is something that I like about the Netflix platform of just being able to sit down and watch it all in its entirety. I do love that. But it does definitely, for something popular, have to be like, cool, I have to like block that from any internet things. Just stay away from Facebook, stay away from social media, just because.
yeah.
And like I follow a lot of like casting directors and producers and people. So the people that work on the shows are constantly like, hey, we're so excited about the show. And this big twist. It's like, no, I didn't get a chance to see it. It's like, wait, that person is back in the show. Oh no, how did that?
Yeah, that happened to me with Stranger Things because they're all like movie episodes. Like they're all like an hour long.
Yeah.
And I don't know how people sit and binge that show or this new season because I watched like 2 episodes and I'm tired.
Yeah, some of those are, I think about that. Some of those are tough. But like, then I look at myself and I go back to like yesterday being 4th of July. I, of course, had on West Wing, political idealism to sort of balance out things happening in the world as it is. But I'm like, wow, these are like 44-minute episodes. And it's like, oh yeah, these are long. I'm like, there are 26 episodes in a season. Oh, wow. And then it's jumping between that and then like an actual 30-minute show, like a 30-minute sitcom or something. It's like,
yeah,
really, my brain starts thinking in terms of like writer stuff of like, cool, how do you pare it down so much to get it to 30 good minutes?
And then how do you have it so that it's interesting enough so that you don't really like burn out on one episode?
Yeah.
Where you overload it.
Yeah. And that's also something of wanting to keep stories contained and leave things open, but not always on a cliffhanger. Because sometimes cliffhangers, if every episode is a cliffhanger, I always am like, I need to watch the next show. But I'm like, I don't know. For me, it's like in any movie or good show, there's always got to be a fun and game section, if that makes sense.
I get that. I do.
Yeah.
It's saying like, I think what I think you're trying to say is it's like where it has a serious plot, but then it has like a little fun part where you could just enjoy it.
Yeah. Where the drama is happening in the background, but the action itself right now is just enjoyable. Like, but I guess that's mostly for movies and stuff. Cause I think of like heist movies. Best part of the heist movie is very rarely the heist. It's the getting the crew together and the shenanigans that happen leading up to that part. It's like, that's what everybody wants in a heist movie. That's the part that all of us are like, oh yeah, no, we all are projecting ourselves onto, yeah, if I had to assemble a crew of the people I know, who would do what job to get this thing done.
Yeah, I think that's why I liked The Boys so much when I was watching it, because it was serious, but then they had like really silly moments, like where they had to dress up as something,
Yeah, and
and they're like, I don't want to dress up like that. That's stupid,
it's
and then
ridiculous.
so being that you audition and you're in things, do you feel like it changes it for you when you watch a movie?
Absolutely. And I would say the number one thing is I've also worked occasionally in production. So like in the behind the scenes part of like helping crew out, helping somebody run lights or do sound on smaller things, as well as being on a studio lot and seeing all of the things that happen that go into production. You definitely get a bigger appreciation for when you're watching something. And it's just like the little things will stand out to you of just like, wow, the lighting there was really good. Or like, oh, that camera
Yeah,
move was crazy. And I know how big that camera is that they had to move. So the fact it moves so
yeah,
swift is insane. But then also like the performances and the direction and stuff, it's always like you always watch it through that lens of the performer part of it, of just like, that was a really good choice. It's like, oh, that my instinct might have been to go somewhere else with that, or to,
yeah.
to play it a little bit more subtly, or it's like that seemed a little bit off, but it was a good setup. And so you just, it's a lot like watching, like whenever I see time lapse of people's art
Yeah.
and you see the whole thought process get built out. It's always really interesting with watching movies and shows because the performances in there, you don't get to see the process getting to there. You just get to see that. Now, occasionally you'll see like an alternate take or something where you'll notice like, okay, a little bit of difference there, but always it's always the final image as opposed to the whole working through it.
Yeah, like I'll watch a movie sometimes, and only because I've shot like videos for people and I've done like theater and like lighting too. And I'll see like how something is shot, and I'll just be like, it's weird. Like I'll pull up my phone and I'll be like
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out the angle, because it's like I'm like, how can I use that? Because that's really cool.
yeah,
I was watching like Doctor Strange, that one scene, not the new one, but the first one,
mhm.
where like the room is like flipping.
Yeah,
I was trying to figure out how they did that, because I was like, that's crazy that they have it flipping like that.
yeah. I love watching the behind the scenes breakdowns of like the VFX studios being like, okay, here's how we made that effect, and it's like that. I'm just going back to drawing here. I'm like, I've been doing a lot of storyboarding, and I'm like, I can make the panel for that, but the actual finished shot is, I'm like, that's a level of special effects that's
Yeah,
wild. But yeah, it always it's interesting being able to look at it from the many different little things, because like as I've gotten older, I definitely have an appreciation for cinematographers and directors of photography, because they are sometimes an unsung hero in it, of just like how to get that shot perfect. Like the director might have the vision, but the DP also has to work with them to
yeah,
have all of that little technical knowledge of like, we need this length lens, especially if we're going to do this move, or if we want to get this atmosphere. And then we got to rack the focus, which it's
you
there.
ever like, yeah, no, it's crazy. I agree.
It's
It's you don't think, you know what it is, you don't think it's as like tricky as it is. So like you'll shoot something and you'll be like, oh, it's just, you zoom in. But then sometimes you'll do something like you're zooming in and you'll notice, like, let's say you're zooming in on like a scene.
mm,
You'll be like, I'm zooming in, but there's something in the background that's really cool. And then out of nowhere, everything is just adding on to it.
yeah, and
It's,
so yeah, because it's always tricky when getting to the editing bay, and that's for whenever I've made things or produced things. I definitely, like I said, I've been doing a lot of storyboards right now, and storyboarding I find is really important just to save time, because the number one thing with making all these things is you got to work with the tools that you the tools that are available and within the time frame that you have. And that's always something that's important to be like, you need a shot list. You need to know what you want to get first, or else you get a day where it's just like that thing in the background. You're like, oh no, it's starting to pull the story in a different direction.
Yeah.
So it's like having that focus of like, here's our Bible. We need to get this, then we can play. It's the homework.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like you have to do that stuff with anything creative.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing because I've seen things where it's like someone shooting a movie and it starts in the daytime, but they're filming the whole day. So it's like, oh, we have to make artificial light to make it seem like it's still the same time as before. And you're just like, well, that's crazy. Like, can you imagine you're shooting something and it only takes place at night and it goes into the daytime, but you can't stop shooting, so you have to like edit all of that in.
That part is tough, but that is something that I definitely notice in films now, is like when lighting goes from one shot to another and it's completely different lighting, and it's like that's because they're shot out in the middle of the day where they were using the sun for a good chunk of it, and then it's like that sun moved too fast, we didn't have that angle. And that's I remember doing a shot out a movie I did out in the desert, and it was super tricky because we were in the salt plains. We were in a salt lake, so it was just like nothing but flat ground, like flat white ground for miles, and it was super cool. But also it was tough because you never had a reference point. So the composition of the scene was always just with the actors and this car that we had. But the thing was, is as the day moved on, we had to keep adjusting ourselves in the car so that we could hold on to the light and have it as consistent as possible. And that is the little things like that are always, I feel like once you've worked in production in that aspect, you can't unsee it. And it's like service jobs, or like me and my friends are always like, it is important that everybody at one point works in the service industry.
Yeah.
Just because you gotta understand the process a little bit in order to have appreciation for everybody that is doing the job. And so, and I being on sets and having seen all of the production aspects, and like everybody is busting the butts to get like the shot, just to get these things moving and moving as quickly as possible. And it's a thing of, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. And so learning that patience of just like, well, why can't we just shoot? It's like, well, we got to get the lighting right. It's like, yeah, the lighting's up there. It looks fine. It's like, yeah, it looks okay.
But it's not the same. Yeah.
But it's, yeah, exactly. It's like you're paying for big productions, like you're paying all these people to do what they do really well. So it's like, you got to give them the space to do what they do really well. And the same, but having worked as a production assistant, where it's like, my job is just running around, running things to people so that they can do those things. It helps you gain so much of an appreciation for everyone's specialization.
Yeah, when I was doing my book, actually, there's this one part of the book where they're in a room, and in the room it was like a giant statue, not a statue, but like a thing in the center of the room, and there were pillars, and the only way I could like draw anything for it was I had to draw the room out. Yeah. And then make like, it was almost like a map. So it's like, they're standing here, this is how it's facing, what is behind them, what is around them. And if I didn't do that, I would realize, I was like, no, that can't work, because they can't move that quick, or they can't like be there, or that statue is like over here, it's not over here.
It definitely has you start thinking in terms of cheats, because I had the same thing. I did a storyboard a couple months ago for a horror film, which was really fun. And I sent the first draft of the scene that I did have, and the guy was like, great. Actually, can I pay you to do this other scene as well? And I was like, sure, I can do that other scene. So I started roughing out my prelims, and I had it in a very basic room because it was just supposed to be a diner. So I just had it at a basic, like, side of the road diner. And the next day the guy was like, great, and we have location photos now. So
Oh
with that, it was
no.
like, okay, so I got the link to the location and all of the photos that went around it. And I was like, I had it in a nice square box where they were supposed to be trapped in with this evil creature. And now I've got an entire restaurant, not just a diner, a huge restaurant. And it was like, okay, let's figure out the choreography that can fit in with this. And I'm also like, okay, so now we got to do choreography. We have to do geography. And also I have to look at all of these pictures and figure out where we can put the camera, as well as what makes sense for, well, if they're at this part, then they're at this part. And it's like, it's okay that it's crazy. The guy, I was so thankful the director was like, it's okay if it's manic and all over the place. It doesn't need to be totally clean. I was like, great. Because I'm
Well,
like,
I mean, yeah, it would have to be manic. There's no way. Even I would feel like a little bit crazy trying to
yeah,
juggle all
but,
that.
but also that the OCD part of my brain is like, yeah, but we want to understand the, if we're going to move them from across the other side of the entire place, then we should have a cutaway to the person who's not in this area right now and stuff like that. But it was the same thing of like, I have to have the reference photos up because I have to, like,
Yeah.
as I'm drawing it out, be like, can the camera fit here? And if we're going to have people crossing, that's a very narrow thing. Okay, we could do that. We could. And for this, it was great of just like, okay, it's a horror film. So people are getting killed left and right. And the guy's like, I want them cartoony. I want them ridiculous. I'm like, great. Now we just have to have a montage. And it's just like, okay, try to make a different kill in every different part of the restaurant so that it makes sense. But also at the end, we have to have like 24 bodies all over the place. So it's like,
And then, yeah,
we
and then
don't
to
want
make,
them
yeah.
stacked on top of each other. We want it to just be chaos.
And then to make sure they're not like where if a body's here, there's a body here. So if like, let's say you're filming like here, you're seeing the other body and it's like, let's balancing everything. I mean, that's crazy. I would imagine that being just super stressful.
It
Yeah.
it was a little stressful, but it was also, for as much as I was like, they might not have been the prettiest pictures that I could make, but they were very clear. It was very clear that it's like, you're in this part of the room, because there was no map of the location. So you're picking out the pieces and trying to figure out how to adapt. And it's good, but you're also like trying to get, okay, creative. Like, oh, because there was one bit where it had a separation, like an indoor window that didn't have anything on it. And I was like, great, he can pick up a weapon here by just swiping the frame and then it's gone. It's like, that's a bit that I didn't have in the original draft. But it's like, it leads to some fun stuff like that. But then you're just like, clarity, just communicating. It's like, first much want it to be pretty, you don't want it to be like, oh, it can stand alone on its own. It's like, you just need to make sure that it works for the people who are using it as a tool.
Can I ask you, you have a picture on Instagram of you as a head.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is that this?
That's not this. No, I did a feature film last year called Life Cycle, which we shot towards the end of, still during the pandemic. And it was a psychological thriller movie set in the near future, with me being a kind of introvert, trying to find the right words to describe the character without giving too much away. But logline is, he builds a robotic head, and programs it to be a learning machine to help him understand what it means to be human by definition. And so as you can see, everything goes horribly awry with that, because the mental state of the robot itself starts to become out of hand, because it's not had any restrictions or any context. So it's just taking in all of this information and trying to relay it. And so it's like, okay, well, first it starts very basic. Then with every update, it's like, cool, now it understands emotion. that starts to make thing that starts to create
Yeah, no,
tension.
emotions are the worst.
And then it starts to understand paranoia and the things that follow with that. And then the futility of existence versus what is the purpose and intent. And it gets into some really philosophical questions that are like the only way that I find the moral of the story to be like, you need to interact with people. Like being, you can't come up with the answer on your own. And I feel like it was very much geared towards trying to get across the fact that it's like, you got to think about other people in order to come up with the reasons for why you do things.
You ever seen Into the Wild?
Yeah.
You know, like how at the end where he's like, he's done all that, and it's the only thing is he's like, I wish I had someone to talk to like tell them all this. That's the only thing. And it's like,
it's like, it's all about connection.
Because you think about it, because it's like the way he dies, it's like, it's almost like if someone else was with him, they could have stopped.
Yeah. They could have stopped
been like, don't do that. They can be like, oh no, are you sure you can eat that? You know, and it's like he's by himself. And that feeling when it's like you're by yourself, it's weird because you have to make the decision for yourself. And you have to think about other people, but it's weird because it's like you're the only person there to make that decision.
Yeah. And so that one like was luckily enough right in the middle of pandemic. And one of our people ended up getting COVID right before we were supposed to start shooting. So we had to push a month. We had to push the production a whole month for the special effects team to be able to coordinate with everything. And so it was another week of like hard quarantine for me because I was the only person on camera. So I couldn't afford to get sick again. I couldn't afford to get sick and have us push production again. So I had to hard lockdown. And it was definitely a thing of the perfect kind of prep for the role of just like, you were just in your apartment by yourself. And it's like, you can watch things, you can work on things, but it's like, I had my lines for the script, but it was a thing of cool. It was a perfect storm of context because it's like, I'm like, I understand where this guy is right now. I understand how he could have got here. And it's the thing of being so desperate to go outside, but in this moment, I can't do that. It's like, okay, all of this bottled up tension and stuff. It's like, cool. What do we do with it? Try to make something. It's like, that's great, but why are you making something? For this guy, it's to understand humanity and not be alone. In my personal life, it was, okay, I have to make sure that I'm safe for production because I want to make this film and do that. But everything overlays. It's like everything's always a recipe. And it's always just a pinch of different ingredients at any different time.
I kind of feel like with projects though, it's always like a part of you. How much do you, because like for me, I feel like it's only, I want to say like 20%. I say like 20, right? What's your, how much of you do you think you're in your projects?
For acting things, it's usually, it's 100%, but it's 100% in that it's because all I've got is myself to use. That's the only tool that I have is my face, my voice, my mind to convey what I'm reading on the script. So it's all me, but it's also about, you're always sampling different parts. So like for acting, it's always just like, where am I pulling from my sources? Because it's like, am I drawing from this line of thinking, or am I drawing from this experience? Am I drawing from this moment where I just need to physically feel this so that I contain it? And you do a bunch of oxymoronic things of thinking about like, I'm very upset in this scene, but I can't seem very upset. So the thought isn't I'm upset, it's don't show it, don't show it, don't show it. And so when you're in the scene, you're just trying not to show it, but the more you try to do it, the worse you do, which is always like ridiculous.
Yeah.
But then whenever it comes to like storyboarding and stuff, I find it to be very fun because it's a little bit more of there's that nice, a good level of detachment where I'm like, I can put my style and my spin on it, but I have what the person wants to see. So it's more of like, cool, taking that interpretation and not letting it be personal. Like probably like you said, around 20%. Whenever I'm storyboarding for something, like 20% is good. Because for the most part, it's just like, well, what do you have on the script? It's like, well, I've got some ideas and I understand how production works. So it's like just taking all the things that I know, but also what does the person want and what might surprise, but is also doable. Because like, I always think of it like playing with toys. Loved action figures as a kid. And I feel like they're the best example of like teaching yourself or like how kids create stories.
Like Dungeons and Dragons.
Like Dungeons and Dragons, or just even like I've got a Michelangelo Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle and I've got Luke Skywalker. Why are they in a scene together? I don't know, but they're not different characters for this. They're the same people, but we just create justifications. And I'm like, that's something that I think is really helpful as a kid. And for writing for me, I think definitely is something I'm trying to tap back into, because there's a great book by Austin Kleed, Steal Like an Artist, which I highly recommend.
I've heard of this book.
It's very good.
I've heard of this book.
Yeah, it's very good. And I really enjoyed it. It's probably not for everybody, but there's in there, he talks about, you steal from everything. You steal from multiple sources. If you're stealing from one place, then you've got a problem. But the whole idea of like, don't struggle to try to be original, just take all of the things that you like.
Yeah, because if you look at your influences, you steal from them too. Like unconsciously, you don't realize you do it. But everything, like when you draw something, you're drawing from the stuff you like.
Yeah.
So it's like you're basically stealing it.
Yeah, and it's like everything is stealing. It's just about acknowledging your sources as well.
Yeah.
Of like, if somebody stole like a design that they liked off of mine, I'd be kind of like, meh. But if they were like giving credit where it's due for the originality of thought, but also it's in the creative fields, there's always going to be overlap. It's like with comedians and jokes. It's like comedians are like, oh, there's a lot of joke stealing. It's like, no, sometimes it's just people have the same thinking and it just arrives to the same comedic beats. And it's always just about pulling from multiple sources. I always like to go with the rule of threes, of just like at least three different things of like, the style of this artist, the storytelling of this director or this movie, and like 3 or 4 different characters from different movies that I think would be fun. Like I just said, Michelangelo and Luke Skywalker there. I'm like, that would actually be an interesting scene. I'm like, okay, let's just give it a genre. It's like Western. Oh, that'd be great. But it's like, okay, if I just give it a Western or like a samurai movie, and then you're just like, okay, well, what would these characters be? Well, we still have our comedic relief. We have the, hero's journey happening for this one. And you just find it's like Legos, and you just find the different pieces and are like, oh, I don't know. I never had like the complete Lego set as a kid. I was just had a mishmash of everything. So it was always, so you're always building these different things and just, it's always,
I think it's funny because last year I saw 4 movies, not even kidding you, based in a hotel or like a giant hotel about quarantine. 4 movies with the same plot, but they were all different in just like approach and everything. And it's like, to the point of what we're saying, it's like, it's the same story told 4 times, but differently.
Yeah.
One was like a serial killer It was like a horror movie. One was like a comedy. I was just like, yeah, it's interesting.
It's interesting. You said that, and now that sparked an idea for me of like, oh, a serial killer during quarantine as a comedy of just like, what's he gonna do? There are no victims out on the street. There's no one to lure into a dark alley and kill because nobody's out on the street. It's quarantine. Gah.
You ever seen Tucker and Dale versus Evil?
I have. I love Alan Tudyk. He's fantastic.
These kids, these kids are coming out here just killing themselves. It's like a suicide pact.
That movie, that is such a great, like, I feel like so few people have seen it, but I love that movie so much. And that's a movie where I'm like, that looks like it was so much fun to make because, well, I've done a couple of horror films, and the one thing that I always joke about is that I'm dying. I'm always dying in the horror films. My character, my casting type, I'm never making it to the end. I'm definitely dying in the first or second act. That's fair. And that's a great movie where I'm like, I would be happy to play any of the roles, Tucker, Dale, or any of the preppy tools. And like,
I just laughed. So I just laughed at that one scene when the guy's running and they're digging, and they're like, she's digging her own grave, and they're just digging a hole, and then he trips over the shovel and knocks her out, and then the guy jumps in and like impales himself on the thing. And I'm like,
I feel like it's one of those last movies that had really good slapstick, where it was like horribly violent, but it was slapstick. So it's like, you're like, oh, that's brutal, but I don't know. But I love horror films, and I love gory B movie films, like the horror films that are made for the super cheap way back in the day, straight to DVD. Some of those just had gold, where they're just so ridiculous and just fantastic.
I always when I talk about this, I always bring up Goosebumps, because there's an episode where the kids go to camp and they look like they're human. And there's like a whole thing, it's scary, and it's like something is chasing them. And then, they fight the monster, and at the end, they're just like, okay, guys. And like the parents come out and they're like, I can't believe, like, why would you do that? And they're like, you're ready to go to Earth. You're ready to go to Earth now. And I'm like, oh.
That was a good you got me.
You got me. You got me. I did see that twist.
No, I'm with you, because the Goosebumps show had some great ones for that. Of like, looking back on them, like, well, those were really effective for scaring and creeping out at a young age. Because I remember one of like the haunted tower where the kids were like actually royalty that were time travelers because parents were assassinated. I mean, I'm conflating all of them, but that and that creepy dummy. But
the dummy one was really good, though.
Yeah.
It didn't scare me, but it was really good.
Yeah. But I definitely am having a really big nostalgia kick recently.
Hold on one second.
Like, sure.
We have less than a minute for this one, so just a heads up.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Go ahead. You're having a big nostalgia kick.
Yeah, of just like going back to 90s, like 90s and 80s, just shows, movies, and stuff like that. And just
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Are You Afraid of the Dark? Yeah.
Okay. I know people had this whole feud with Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark. I'm just going to say it right now. Are You Afraid of the Dark was the better show. Goosebumps was the better books.
Fair enough. That's mic drop. I don't have an argument here.
Are You Afraid of the Dark